It's the region's most popular talk show, Midlands Today on Midlands 103.
Midlands 103.
The power of healing. Is it confined only to those who spend years at university to become nurses or doctors? Or is it the preserve of a few rare disciplines beyond conventional physicians, medical herbalists and the like? Or is it a gift that is more complex and difficult to explain? Well, I'd like you to meet Joe Cassidy. He is a native of Naas in County Kildare, a sick child who defied his doctors, and a man who says he has remarkable gifts. His new book, The Diviner, is on shelves near you now. Joe, you're very welcome to the programme. Thanks for coming into it.
Thank you.
Now, your entry into the world was a little bit difficult, a little bit unusual. Tell us about it.
Yeah, well, I was a bit aware of it some years later when I was starting to find myself and talking about doing healing and things. And my mother explained to me that prematurely she went into labour and there was complications and I was rushed to the hospital. And on birth it was felt that I wasn't going to make it. And the words were used, actually, that she'll go home to pray that God will take him. He'll never be anything a vegetable, something to that. And my mother had 3 healthy children. So she said, obviously, she prayed the opposite to God or whatever. It's a very spiritual woman herself, that I would remain. So I spent the first few months of my life in an incubator in hospital, came home.
And silent. You didn't cry, apparently.
Yeah, well, that's what I was told as well. I didn't seem to cry when I was wet, dirty, hungry, anything like that. And she said another thing she noticed, both myself and my father, Lord of Mercy, used to get up on night regularly and look into the cot, and I didn't seem to sleep much. But then, anyway, and as I say, she had 3 healthy children, so she knew what a healthy child was. So while walking down the town one day, she met the local priest, and this is what I was made aware of years later. And the priest said something like, sorry for your troubles, and must go up and bless him. So she asked, could he come up that day? So he came up, and he blessed me. And all my mother can say is that when the priest blessed me, and when he left, and she closed the door, it was like flicking a switch. I was crying or acting normal for the first time. So she fully doesn't understand. She just told me the story, and at the time, I was glad to hear it.
But I'm interested, you said this was only when you started to discover healing and look at that sort of gift that you asked her about it. When you were growing up, was there anything unusual or anything out of the ordinary to trigger a thought, gosh, have I something special here?
Well, when I was growing up, looking back on it, I would call a very strict sixth sense. And growing up with it, I was evident of it, but I wasn't very evident that other people weren't the same. Because when you're growing up, you have something. So when you get to a certain age, I started to realise that I was different. And, I would, for instance, I have it in the book. I remember one day playing football on the local green, come in to go to the loo or something, running back down the stairs. My intention was to go out and score a goal. And I saw a neighbour linking his wife in the pathway. And I'm only a child, but I'm focused on the lady and the gentleman and the walking in, and I get a vision of them being in a crash. So I shout into my mother, Ma'am, Mr. and Mrs. something are after being in a crash. It happened at the bridge in Salins, and the man that hit them was drunk. I ran back out. You might find this strange, but my intention was to go back out and score a goal, because I was getting
business as usual,
all the time. So sometime later, it was an hour or so later, neighbour came over and said to my mother, did you hear about... Well, sorry, before I left, my mother said, where did you hear that? It's something that comes in this. I just know. So then a neighbour came over an hour later or whatever and relayed to my mother what I had told her. Now, I wasn't told. I was a child. Different things like that, looking back, were evident.
You also rescued some friends, I think, who were walking along a road.
Yeah,
and you tried to bundle them into the ditch.
Yeah, and actually I've met people. I met a gentleman, about 2 years ago, I haven't met him in years. And I was talking to him. It wasn't in this capacity of diviner, healer or anything. And he led on to it, and I said to him, well, what do you think of that, And he said, I'm not surprised. And I said, what do you mean? But he said, with different experiences with you growing up, we knew you were different, but you didn't.
Just to complete the story, you bundled them into a ditch. They were resisting and wondering why, and the next moment a truck comes along and would have swiped them out of it.
Yeah.
So looking back, you can say, yes, there was something there, but you weren't aware of it at the time.
I wasn't aware of it until I got to a certain age, yeah.
And what happened that tweaked you to it?
What do you mean, sorry?
What happened that made you aware of it?
Well, when you get to a certain age and you're, for instance, something comes up in the news headlines and it's about a topic or a crime or something, and you're getting visions of what might have taken place. Not all the time. And then 24 hours later or a week later, you open the same paper and you're reading a vision of what you saw in your head. So it doesn't take one too long to discover you're different.
You've probably heard this a million times thrown at you by skeptics. If you can see visions of what's to come, why aren't you a millionaire? Why aren't you going out and doing the lotto? I
wasn't meant to be a millionaire. And people would say things like that, why aren't you a millionaire? I'm not a millionaire. I've written a book of my life experiences. And for instance, there was different routes I could have went with what people call a gift. I think nearly everyone is gifted. And this brand of a gift, I don't see where it goes really. But anyway, I remember, I'll give you an example. About 12 or 13 years ago, I got a phone call from a girl. It was during the good times anyway. And there was 20 or 30, I can't remember the number, girls coming up our locality for a hen party. They'd heard about me and my sixth sense. And they offered me a lot of money to sit down with them for the 24 hours or go into the next day and take the money and give them a reading. I don't do that. I wasn't put on this earth to do it. I declined. So if you take that a number of years ago, I could have done things like that. I haven't. I've worked on this thing. I've worked with people. I work healing land, animals and people. And I was never in it for a quick buck. And the other thing is because I know there's huge scepticism to things like that. But if you're born with something and you have it, I feel you use it.
Well, just to illustrate the point a little more, you did work in construction. And
yes.
Whenever you'd meet people at reunions or whatever, you could say, well, I work on the buildings, and nobody would bat an eyelid.
Yeah.
These days, you say, I'm a diviner or I'm a healer.
Yeah.
What's the reaction?
Well, mostly I don't tell it to people who are ringing me. Are ringing me for a diviner, so I don't think if they're ringing me for my service.
No, but I mean, we in Ireland are obsessed with what other people do. It's almost the opening question when you haven't seen somebody in years. What do you do these days?
Yeah, but that's their problem. It's all right to be, like, if you take it, most of us were conformed, we're in a circle. We're all in a circle. We're this, we're that, the other. If you step outside the circle, you're different. So, loads of people that step outside the circle can be different in any capacity. It can be a rock star or whatever. When he was growing up, you're not going to be a rock star. Who do you think is going to be a rock star? But he pursues it. He's going to be a rock star. He steps outside the circle. But he's very successful at what he wants to do. Now, if he fails and he's not a rock star, maybe he'll go with something else till he finds what he wants to do. So the answer to your question, if everybody's asking me, what it is to be different, I think it'd be a boring old world if we were all the bloody same.
But how do you figure out how to pursue the discipline that you're in now? Because you didn't have, if you're a rock star, you look to other musicians, you follow their lead, you go and take music lessons.
Yeah.
You had, and we'll just call it a gift for the purposes of the interview, but you didn't necessarily have the refinement of how to use it, or did it just come instinctively? Did you know what to do in a way that is hard to explain?
No, I suppose that's why we'd say even with doing the book, it took me years to have the confidence to do the book. And yeah, the answer to your question, no, there wasn't too many people to talk to. But like, if you're doing something, like for instance, I'll hit on a story using my sixth sense. I was in a hospital once, and it's in the book. And I'm not blaming the doctor, I'm not judging the doctor, because you're sitting looking at everyone that believes that everything happens for a reason. I was told that you can go home tomorrow, Mr. Cassidy, you're being discharged, right? I don't hold any grudge about this doctor or the hospital that I'm going to tell the story about. And I said, I'm going home. And he said, yes. And I said, well, I feel I'm very sick. But I'm only the patient now, and he's the doctor. So he says, what do you mean? I said, I believe I need a test done, which was called an angiogram. And I said, I want it done. He says, no, you don't need that done. You're fine, you can go home. Well, I said, you signed this piece of paper to say that I'm healthy enough to go home. He didn't sign it. And I was brought to another hospital where there had to be emergency surgery done on me. And I was told that I could have dropped dead if I was released from hospital. So I'd rather be sitting here talking to you, with all due respect, whatever question you throw at me, rather than being 6 foot under because I stayed in the circle and didn't question the doctor.
Yeah, lucky that you had the ability to do that, because many people would take the doctor's advice, be relieved of getting out of hospital and never know any different.
Sure they would.
Now, let's talk about animals.
Yeah.
There was a section in the book where somebody rings you and you can't go. I think there was a cow that needed attention.
Yeah.
And you couldn't make it there for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And they described to you the setting over the phone, this landscape, the animal, gave you a picture and an impression of what was wrong, and you were able to do something.
Yeah, that's quite common. I get that a lot of the, especially a certain time of the year. It's a cow that has given birth to a calf. And mostly it's that the calf has been a very big calf and it's been a hard, tough birth or whatever on the cow. And if the cow doesn't get up within a certain period, sometimes they can end up paralysed. So when I started out at this again, years ago, finding myself, as you say, I couldn't go and talk to everyone about it, a lot of time I got into the car. And I was on this road, down this part of the country, 10, 11 years ago, going to see a cow, give it a healing. And a lot of the time, the cow would get up. It wasn't getting up for the other treatments it was getting, and it got up. And then one night, in particular, since you bring this up, I remember going to a farmer, please, Mr. Cassidy, could you come down to me? And I went down, and I remember getting a puncture on a back road, and I was delayed, and I had no spare, but it took a while, so I couldn't go to the man. So I rang him, obviously, telling him I couldn't make it, and it was a horrible night. I turned around and went home, and I said to him, where do you live? He told me where you live. What colour is the cow? What breed is the cow? I tell you what I'll do. I'm going to send it a healing. So I believe everything happens for a reason. So I had a horrible night having me puncture, but I sent the cow a healing, and I sent it the next day, and the farmer rang me to tell me the cow was up. So I said, well, if I did it because I had a puncture and I couldn't get to him, the next time they ring, I'll try it from a distance. If it's a farmer a mile or two up the road, I'll go up and do it. But then the next fellow rang me, and a man rang me, I'm not great with time, I'd say about a month ago, and he told me that it was the 8th cow that got up from me doing my work, that nobody else could get up. So take what you like out of that.
You mentioned earlier that you were not put on this earth to be a millionaire. You were put on this earth.
Well, I don't know whether if I win the lotto tomorrow night, I was put on this earth to be a millionaire.
Okay, but that this gift you have is not intended to make you a millionaire, and that you're doing the work you've just described.
If my book ends up that I'm a millionaire, I don't know whether it will or not. I was meant to be a millionaire. I live in the moment.
Where I'm leading is, how do you know what you are put on the earth to do? Because you seem very certain that this healing is what God or whoever else intended you to do.
Yeah, God, whatever it is, the universe, I don't know. Sorry, repeat the question.
Question is, how can you be so certain this is what you're meant to do?
Well, the proof is in the pudding. If something is working, don't change it.
But, I mean, did you feel there was a calling? Was there something driving you to do this? What brought you to where you are now?
Well, my own health went against me. And when I went to a doctor, when they were trying to figure out what was wrong with me, and I sat in front of her and was able to tell her all about her childhood and the history of her family, which I couldn't have known about, she said, Joe, you better use what you have or you're not going to get better. So I started to use what I have. And life changed. My health improved. I still have a bit of a weak leg. My health improved. Everything improved. I help people. I don't promise anybody anything. And again, that's why I'm sitting here years later. If people ring me, they come usually because somebody else has recommended, whether it's an animal that needs healing, whether it's a person, or whether it's land healing. It's all word of mouth as such.
But do you ever ask, why me? Because I can't do what you can do. I'm sure nobody outside can do what you can do. Few people listening can do what you can do. Do you ever ask, why were you given the ability to do what you can do?
Of course you would, but going back to the thing that I live in the moment a lot, I have to live in, I have to accept this is what I am, this is what it looks like I put here to do. I don't go around questioning everything. Enough people go around questioning.
But yet you form views on things, like be it the paranormal, be it the afterlife. You deal with some of that in the book.
Yeah.
What's your view of the universe?
No, sorry, be a bit more specific, what do you mean?
As in, how, why are we all here? What made this? Where are we going?
That's a very good question. If we all knew that. I'm intrigued about what I described the universe. Yeah, none of us, I don't know what it's about. I know who I am now. And that I'm happy enough with that.
And what next when we pass on?
Well, I believe there's something out there. Or it's a very good question, because if I go into a land or a property, an old property, I can go in, and I've done it, and identify, pick up on somebody that lived there X amount of years ago. So they're not around now. Nobody is telling me. So am I picking up on the energy that's just here, because I believe everything is energy? Or am I clicking into an afterlife where they are, and they're nearly presenting to me through telepathy or what? I haven't got all the answers.
But for instance, not too far away from where you live on the Curragh, there's an area known as the Gibbet Rat, where hundreds of people were massacred. If you go to somewhere like that, is there any impression? Is there an echo? Do you get a vibe? Because even people who don't have a gift will pick up on something there.
Yeah, if I go there, I've never gone there. But surely...
But places like that.
Yeah, but that's self-explanatory in the book, because if I'm called to a place where there had to do work where there's been misery or whatever, or something that isn't a good energy, yes, I will pick up on it. I can't say all the time, but I've never gone to somewhere that I'm aware of that I didn't pick up on what the problem might be.
And how much insight do you have into future events?
Future events? I don't really go there. Don't to sound and repeat myself, but I live in the moment quite a lot. I will explain this to you. Again, to the skeptic, it's hard to believe. I do see the future at times. And I remember, I'll give you one example where I was asleep one morning, and again I'm going to mention something. I was dreaming, so you're a dreamer. And I was dreaming, and I dreamt of, I can't remember, it was a European country, I think it was France or Spain or somewhere, just a few years ago, where there was some shooting of children or something in a school. And I was dreaming of this from an aerial view. I woke up kind of, what's that about? 10 minutes later, I made a cup of coffee and I turned on Sky News. And I was looking at exactly on Sky News from a helicopter view, which I had seen in my dream, of the event that I dreamt about.
Accurately?
That's what I'm telling you. So there's loads of things like that. I've often, for instance, I was on a plane one day, an airplane, and the lads were with me, said, Joe, do a bit of your stuff there. I don't usually get into it. It's not a circus act for me. But I was going to a country that I was never in before. I was going to an area that I was never in before. And I drew a picture of a certain object, right, that was tattered and old. And in the first evening, when we were out and about, I went off for a walk down the beach. And I put what I drew, one or two things in an envelope, and I gave it to a certain individual. Told him not to open it until I say when. So they called me, "You're right, Joe, you coming, you coming?" And I was, right, I'll be up in a minute. And when I went up, the three lads were standing in a certain area. So I told your man that I gave the envelope, "Will you open the envelope?" So he opened it and he said, "What's this?" And I said, "Look up." And they were standing under what I'd drawn. Now, I'm not an artist, but they were standing.
But they could make out the essence of it, yeah.
Yeah.
And you also got people to switch off their mobile phones in a pub once, I believe, and indicated which one was going to ring.
Yeah.
Does that convince people, or do they still remain sceptical?
It'll convince whoever's meant to be convinced. I don't live my life to convince anyway. It's like when I asked you, can I come in here because I wanted to be aware of it, did you read the book or did you not? You told me that, with fair play to you, that you didn't read it, that your father read it, and that your father, it sounds like, of the type, nice gentleman, that, like a lot of people, mightn't have been open to this. He read the book, and I think, I'm not just saying it, you kind of said, well, he enjoyed it. Or took what? I'd say he took something out of it.
And filled me in and seemed to be engrossed with it, because when he picked it up, I thought, right, he's going to make a few pages into this, and I think he finished it.
Yeah. But we're not all meant to be believers of things like this. I don't shove it down anybody's neck.
Why write the book then?
Because I wrote the book, because I was approached to write the book, and I wanted to write the book. Because I'm well known, so this will sound a contradiction, everybody knows me and nobody knows me. Because I meet people. It's like when I went to the school reunion, as I mentioned in the book. Some people weren't aware that I was doing it. Others were. Others weren't surprised. It's time to say, this is who I am, what I am. Take it, leave it. That's it.
Joe Cassidy, it has been an experience. Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.